Hey guys, Dr. Heldman here. How you doing today? Welcome to the new year. In this movie, what I want to do is walk you through section 4 of TryHackMe's. It's called Enumeration and Brute Force Room. These are superb lessons. I recommend that you run out and buy an annual subscription to TryHackMe right away, as I think you're going to really benefit from the teaching that they do. All I'm trying to do in this video is augment the stuff that goes on with regard to Burp Suite, which is very interesting. And so let's get started. It should be interesting and informative for you. Well, I know it was for me. Well, I've logged back into TryHackMe. I'm going through a room called the Enumeration and Brute Force room. I have found this lesson to be very, very useful for me, and I'm sure you'll find it useful for you. I am using the attack machine. I don't have the attack box. I'm using Kali Linux with this particular attack machine, and I've obtained this IP address. And now I'm looking at this. So I'm in section task 5 here, and what we're talking about is what's called basic authentication. So the idea is that basic authentication is used by things like routers, devices. They only require a username and a password. And so it says it makes it easy to implement and manage on devices with limited processing capabilities. So in other words, we're not asking a router or a switch or something like that to do anything apart from authenticate us. And so it's a basic authentication. It's an HTTP authentication. And it's defined in something called RFC 7617. Now, I want to show you this. I had a guy that I worked with one time who went home and read RFCs at night, and I thought, this man's a crazy man. But be that as it may, you need to know about RFCs. They're very, very important. And so what I'm going to do is right-click this thing and open it in a new tab and show it to you. Now this is what an RFC looks like. It's made by the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, and it was updated as of September 2015, and you can go down through here and read all about it, and it's a lot of reading. So the main idea here is that it's describing to you how something's going to work based upon whatever the topic is, and in this case it's HTTP Basic Authentication here. So that's what they're pointing out in TryHackMe, and you need to get accustomed to the idea of an RFC. I don't really read these things like over the top, like it's a lot of reading, but they are really helpful in terms of beefing up your technological capabilities and understanding of what's going on. And so that's why they mention it here, that it is a part of RFC 7617, this HTTP Basic Authentication. Now, here's the thing, and this is why I did the Base 64 class before this, because it is straightforward and it uses Base 64. Now, you need to remember that Base 64 is not an encryption method, and it can be easily decoded. However, the idea here is that we're putting everything out on the wire in these 6-bit packets of data, and so everything can move very swiftly and very quickly and easily, and that's the concept behind Base 64. So they have a really good graphic here. I like this graphic a lot. This graphic actually came from Mozilla, who are the people that are responsible for developing Firefox, and Mozilla does a lot of great work in terms of their documentation, so they are someone that's worth paying attention to in terms of technical documentation. Now you've got a client and you've got a server. So what happens is the client sends a GET request. It's called a GET. And he says, hey, I want to authenticate to you, and I'm going to talk to a staging server. So the server asks the user for credentials. That's this little blip here. The server is now saying, cool, give me some credentials. And so I send my credentials back, and look, these are in the form of Base 64. If I pass, if my credentials are okay, I get a HTTP 200, which means success or okay. Otherwise, I get a 401, which means you are not authorized. So that's the basic flow with HTTP Basic Authentication. Can we say basic a little more often? So they go on to describe the authorization header in the HTTP header. Looks like this. It's got credentials, and it's a base 64 encoding, and it's the username and password that's actually encoded. And you could refer back to RFC 7617. Now what they want you to do is they want you to go out to this website here, and I already have OpenVPN running, so that's what I'm going to use. If you started the actual attack machine, you'd have two panes, one that's showing the class and one that's showing the machine, and you would go to it that way. But in this case, I'm using Kali Linux with OpenVPN, and so I right click and I take and copy this link address, and now I'm going to go over to Kali. Now we have to use Burp Suite for everything that we're going to do in this particular section. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start Burp Suite right now. This is Burp Suite CE, it is not Burp Suite Pro, and it is going to be a little bit slower, and it's not as robust as Burp Suite Pro. And if I'm being honest with you, I used Grok. Grok is one of my favorite AI tools, GROQ. To look this up, I just said, how much does Burp Suite Pro cost? And it came back and said that a single user license is $299 per year, which isn't too bad. That's really, that could be like, I don't know, whatever, but it's not too bad. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and select the temporary project in memory, click Next, and we're going to use the Burp Suite defaults, so we click Next. So Burp Suite comes up. Now listen, the interface on Burp Suite has changed, and it's a pretty dramatic change, even over and above the TryHackMe class. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're pretty much always going to go to proxy. What I'm going to do is turn intercept on right away, and I'm going to go into the browser. I don't think there's a need to use the Firefox browser here when we're using Burp Suite, because it includes a fork of the Chromium browser by default in the package, and I like it a great deal. Now I'm going to right click here and select paste and go, and it should take me to the lab. But what you're seeing here is what Burp Suite is doing. So Burp Suite is acting as a proxy. What that means, proxy means I'm standing in the back on behalf of you. So what that means is Burp Suite is saying, hey, I'm going to accept any requests that you have, and then I'm going to be responsible for sending them back. And you've really got to get used to this. This is a very, very interesting feature of Burp Suite. So what's happening here, you can see over here that the website has gone back to its normal page. Over here, you can see that in the request section, I have received the request. And so when intercept is turned on and you want to move back and forth between different web pages, you're going to have to get in the habit of selecting this forward button to forward the request back to the browser so it can do something else. And you might wind up doing 5 or 6 of these things before you really get where you need to go. So you're going to have to get used to the idea if intercept is on, you're going to have to do this forwarding to get things to happen for you. If you turn intercept off, it's just going to do whatever it does normally in the browser, and you won't see anything inside Burp Suite. So I'm going to go ahead and forward this request, because now what I'm doing is it's just caught the very first thing that I've gone to the website, and I'm going to forward this request on, and it comes back to the Chromium browser. This looks very similar to what you're seeing on the TryHackMe screen, and I'm just going to log in, and I'm going to use any old thing. So I'm going to just use admin with password admin. The point here is we don't really care what we're using. What we're trying to do is we're trying to intercept what this page is doing. So I'm going to sign in. Now what it does is it sends something very, very interesting back to me. It sends back this right here. Let me see if I can get up to it. This is the base 64 stuff right here. And so it passed that in. So that is what we're going to work with here, is the base 64 information that was passed in by virtue of the site. Now what is that information? What did you type in when you were logging in? Well, you typed in admin, or whatever the username and whatever the password was. These were encoded into base 64, and that's what's showing up here. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to send this to intruder. There's a couple of ways to do this, but I'm just going to right click and say send to intruder. Notice that it could be Control I for intruder. Now I also want you to pay attention. I talked about this before. Right now the proxy button is green, but when you go to intruder, it's going to light up in green as well so that you know intruder is active. So let's go there, and now intruder is active. Boom, right there. Now this is really cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this base 64, and I can't figure out why my mouse has gotten funny with me and Kali right now. That's okay, I'll just use my arrow keys. I'm going to highlight this base 64. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say convert selection base 64 decode, which is a Control Shift B. So you could have highlighted this base 64 and just decoded it with Control Shift B, or you can go through the menus as well. Voila, it shows you what the username and password that were passed in by the user to the screen. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to get some passwords. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use Firefox for this. So I'm going to open up Firefox and I'm going to go out to a URL that is supplied by TryHackMe, and I'm going to find that password that we're looking for. So we're looking for something called 500 worst passwords. The URL is provided in the TryHackMe class right here. So I jump back to TryHackMe just to show you where it's at. So you can see here that this is the GitHub area where you want to go. This is where we'll direct Firefox. But if you were using the attack machine, the attack box instead of the attack machine, which is what I'm using, you could go out to this folder right here and it's already preloaded. So what I'm going to do is right click, copy this link address and move back to Kali. Now that I'm in Kali, I'm going to go ahead and right click and paste and go, and it's going to take me to this GitHub site. And what I'm going to do is I see that I have 500 worst passwords.txt. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the ellipsis right here. This is called an ellipsis, these three dots. I'm going to grab that and download that file. Now I've already done that, but I want to show you what I did. So I will download this file again. It doesn't take very long. It's all text. I can close Firefox now. Now what I'm going to do is open up the File Explorer, which I like to use for stuff like this. Rather than doing all that typing, the File Explorer is fine by me. They call it the file system. Thunar or Thunar, I don't know how you pronounce that. So it's under Kali Downloads, right here. There it is. So what you're going to want to do, it's exactly like in Windows or like in the Mac. You right click and you cut it, and where I'm going to paste it is in my folder here, THM EBF. So you can see that I've already pasted it there. That's how you get it where you need to go in order to do the rest of this work. It doesn't need to be here. You could put it somewhere else, but because I'm working with enumeration and brute force, I'm just going to put it in this folder so I know where it is. All right, so we've got that. The next thing that we want to do is we want to mark this base 64 text. Actually, the lesson tells you to mark it beforehand, but it doesn't matter as long as you're aware that before you go in and begin doing any password brute forcing, you take this and highlight this. Now, I called this a double S. I'm going to draw this on the screen for you so you can see. It's called a double S because you make a top S and a bottom S, and then in the middle is enveloped in a circle. I'm going to add a double S here, and I'm going to add a double S. I'm going to arrow over and add a double S over here because we want to do that specific work. Next thing we do, and you can see on the TryHackMe screen, they're showing that things are kind of under one another, and that interface has changed. I'm using Brute Force 2024.9.4 or Burp Suite 2024.9.4, and the interface has changed. So the entire payload interface has been moved over to the right. You can move it to the left if you like, or you can move it back to the right. It doesn't really matter. And what we're going to do is we're going to load up that worst passwords list. So I click load, and I'm going to grab 500 worst passwords right there, and there they all are. Now the next thing we're going to do is add a couple of rules to this thing, because we want it to pay attention to certain things that are happening within the base 64. So we've already done some payload configuration. This is called the payload. The payload means this is the data that we're dropping in to examine whatever it is we're trying to examine, whatever we're trying to accomplish. So we've got the payload sitting out here. Now I'm going to add some rules to payload processing. So I click Add here, and I get this thing here. The first thing I'm going to do is add a prefix, because I'm dealing with this username admin here, admin colon. I'm going to add that. So I'm going to select this and add a prefix, and the prefix that I'm going to add is admin colon. And I click OK. You can see that the rule gets added right here. I'm going to add one more rule, and the rule that I'm going to add is called an encode rule right here. And my key characters are going to be base 64 encode, like so. And click OK. So now I've got a payload. I've got a couple of rules that are enabled. The last thing you should check is at the bottom. It's way down here on the bottom. You want to make sure the payload encoding is turned on. Now, what's happening here, this is very interesting. So when I'm writing HTML code, there are certain characters that have to be escaped. What that means is that they are used by default in the web page to do different jobs. And so what we have to do is fool the HTML page into accepting these raw characters by encoding them. And so that's what's happening here. We're encoding these special characters here that are special to HTTP requests. So this is by default enabled. Now we're going to start the attack. Now the class says it's only going to take 2 minutes. It's actually not going to take 2 minutes. It's going to take a lot longer than that. So I'm going to let this baby process, and I will come back to you when we're all done, and we're going to look at the results of this. While you're watching this load, one of the things to pay attention to is that you're seeing all of these different status codes right here. Status code 401 means error. What you're looking for is you're looking for 200 success. And what 200 means is, hey, that password worked for me, so I can get in. That's what we're looking for. But we've got to let this thing sit here and cook. And it is definitely not 2 minutes. It's quite a bit longer than that, at least on my computer. So I'm going to let this cook, and I'll come back to you when it's done running. Well, so here we are. We're all done, and you can see the output up here. I apologize to you for not having a video of me in this last segment here, but the software I'm using, Camtasia, isn't showing my camera right now. And that means I've got to reboot the computer, but I had to wait an hour for this thing to run, so I don't want to reboot the computer just so I can show myself on screen. So anyway, I'm showing you that my screen here is working fine, and I've done my scan here. And if you're looking at this column here, status code, that's what we're interested in. So you click status code to have it sort it from top to bottom. And you can see that all of these here in this column are a 401 error, which means doesn't work, except this one which says 200, which does work. Now, here's what you're going to do. You click the 200 and you show that in the pretty section, it says that it's got an authorization and is showing you a base 64 ID. So the next thing that you do is you highlight this thing and you say, convert, where's that at? Convert selection, base 64, and we want to decode this thing, and you get that it says this, so I copy this to the clipboard, and then I go back to the website so that I can key that in. So I'm going to reintroduce that website here. Remember that since you have proxy mode enabled, you're going to have to click forward to go back to the initial sign-on sheet here, and then I will type in what I attained from that good hack and sign in, and then I click forward like so. I'll never save the password, and there is my flag. Yay, I like that flag. And that's all that I have for you. So I just wanted to tell you Thank you for listening to me. Love it that you guys are listening. My goal is to try to get to 1,000 viewers, so I'd love it if you'd help me pass the word along. And I will love it if you subscribe. You're welcome to comment. Please encourage your friends to take a look at these videos. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you in the next video. Have a nice day.